They mocked him, underestimated him, and assumed he wouldn't retaliate, until one flawlessly executed move silenced the entire school. The first thing William Mercer noticed about Redmond High School was its pristine appearance. It wasn't just clean, it was meticulously polished, overtly controlled. The glass windows mirrored the world with unsettling precision, the floors gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, and the corridors stretched out with an orderliness that felt unnatural for a place teeming with teenagers. It was a stark contrast to his old school in Birmingham, Alabama, where vibrant student murals adorned the walls and the spontaneous rhythm of beatboxing often echoed from a stairwell. Redmond High felt sterile. His mother had framed the relocation as a fresh start. His father, ever the pragmatist, simply called it a necessary change. William wasn't sure what to call it yet, but the moment he stepped through the main entrance he felt the gazes. Not overt stares. That would be too blatant. But swift, fleeting glances, hushed whispers, and the way some students subtly assessed him head to toe before looking away. The message was clear. Who is this guy? William, at 5 feet 10 inches, wasn't small for a 16-year-old. His physique spoke of years of disciplined training, not just casual workouts. Lean, controlled muscle. He moved with the quiet self-assurance his father had instilled in him. Steps measured, posture erect, never a hint of a slouch. Yet to them he must have appeared an outsider because he was. He reached the front office without incident, collecting his schedule from the overly solicitous receptionist. As he exited, a cluster of students by the lockers caught his eye. A tall, broad-shouldered young man with meticulously styled blonde hair leaned against the lockers, flanked by 2 others who chuckled at something he'd just said. Their laughter wasn't loud. It was the kind designed to be overheard, just enough to ensure the target recognized they were the subject of the joke. William wasn't the target yet, but he sensed it, a slow, unfolding calculation. The blonde individual, Ryan Callow, according to the class roster he'd briefly scanned, gave him a look that wasn't outright hostile but certainly wasn't welcoming. It was the kind of look someone gives when deciding whether or not to create a problem for you. William had encountered it before. Ryan smirked, leaned towards one of his companions, and murmured something too low for William to catch. The other 2 chuckled, their eyes lingering on him a moment too long. William slowly exhaled through his nose and walked past them, choosing to ignore it. He had nothing to prove. His father's voice resonated in his mind, the same counsel he'd received countless times. Strength isn't about grand displays. It's about understanding when to disengage. So he disengaged. But individuals like Ryan rarely appreciate being overlooked. And this wouldn't be their final encounter, though William was unaware of that then. William had been at Redmond High for less than a week, but he already grasped the unspoken dynamics. The school operated on a quiet hierarchy, never overtly stated but profoundly understood. Athletes held sway, affluent students moved like royalty, and everyone else navigated existence without drawing undue attention. William found himself somewhere in between. He wasn't boisterous, wasn't seeking conflict, but he also wasn't timid. That alone made him conspicuous. People like Ryan Callow thrived on easy targets. Kids who recoiled, who offered nervous laughter when insulted, who faltered in their responses. William was not one of those kids, but Ryan was determined to make him one. It began subtly. A non-accidental shoulder bump in the hallways, a mumbled "watch where you're going" just loud enough for William to hear, a notebook accidentally swept from his desk in history class. Ryan would flash that smirk afterwards as if conducting an experiment, awaiting a reaction. William offered none. Then came the taunts. Didn't realize they allowed kids from the hood in here, Mercer. Ever thought about trying out for football? I mean, you people are good at that, right? Man, you're quiet. No smart comebacks. Thought you guys were supposed to be funny. The most insidious part was that Ryan never uttered these remarks directly in front of a teacher. They were always just soft enough that an uninvested observer could dismiss them as a joke, just subtle enough that Ryan could feign innocence if confronted. And the others? They laughed. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to make William's hands clench into fists beneath his desk. He considered telling his father, but he already knew the response. Handle it with discipline. Don't stoop to their level. And his mother? She would worry, suggest talking to a teacher. William knew that wouldn't help. The school wouldn't discipline a star athlete over unsubstantiated claims. So William handled it as he always had. He ignored it. At least that was the plan until one moment shifted everything. It was Friday lunch period. William had just settled with his tray, minding his own business, when a shadow fell over his table. Ryan stood behind him, flanked by Zach and Brandon, his usual entourage. Ryan grinned, his voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Man, I've been wondering, why don't you talk much, Mercer? Cat got your tongue?" William didn't reply. He took a bite of his food, chewing slowly. That answer wasn't sufficient. Ryan snatched the apple from William's tray and flung it across the cafeteria. It landed with a dull thud near the drink station. A few heads turned, students waiting to see what would unfold next. William carefully, deliberately, set down his fork. He looked at Ryan, meeting his eyes for the first time all week. Ryan smiled, mistaking William's silence for apprehension. And that's when he made his gravest error. He shoved William's shoulder hard, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Come on, Mercer," he challenged. "Do something." William inhaled deeply, his muscles already coiled, controlled. And this time he didn't walk away. The cafeteria froze. Conversations ceased. The scraping sound of plastic trays against tables stopped. Even the lunch staff behind the counter paused, observing from a distance. Ryan Callow had just shoved William Mercer in front of everyone, and now, everyone waited to see what would happen. William remained still for a moment, his mind already calculating. His father's words echoed in his head. "You don't fight with anger. You fight with control." Slowly he pushed his chair back and stood up. No haste, no panic. His movements were precise, effortless, like a man stretching before a workout. Ryan's smirk widened. "Oh, we've got a tough guy," he scoffed, glancing at his friends. "You gonna swing, Mercer? You gonna act like a thug now?" William's expression didn't change. He simply tilted his head slightly, scrutinizing Ryan as if he were an unresolved equation. That was the moment Ryan realized something was amiss. William wasn't nervous. He wasn't flinching. He wasn't even blinking. The grin on Ryan's face faltered just a fraction. A hesitation, a subtle shift in his weight, as if some deep primal instinct was kicking in, warning him that maybe, just maybe, he'd made a mistake. But it was already too late. Ryan reached out, shoving William again. This time William moved swiftly. Before Ryan's hands could fully extend, William's left hand shot up, gripping Ryan's wrist in one fluid motion. His right hand followed, lightning quick, controlled, clamping onto Ryan's elbow. Then with zero effort, William pivoted ever so slightly, using Ryan's own momentum against him. Ryan's feet left the ground. His back slammed onto the cafeteria floor before he even registered what had occurred. A sharp, stunned silence filled the room. Ryan gasped, genuinely shocked, his body sprawled on the tile. He scrambled to sit up, eyes wide, bewildered. His friends took a step forward, but William didn't even acknowledge them. Instead, he crouched down beside Ryan, his voice low, even, "Don't touch me again." No threats, no insults, just a declaration. And that's what made it so much worse. Ryan wasn't just beaten, he was dismissed. William stood up, calmly dusted off his hands as if he'd simply rearranged a chair and picked up his tray. He didn't look back as he walked away. The cafeteria remained in dead silence. Students stared at Ryan, at William, at each other. Then somewhere in the back, a single voice whispered, "Holy..." And just like that, the floodgates opened. Whispers morphed into murmurs, murmurs into excited conversations. Someone had captured the entire event on their phone. Someone else was already texting about it. And Ryan? He remained seated on the floor, jaw clenched, hands curled into tight, white-knuckled fists. Because he knew. By the time the last bell rang, everyone at Redmond High would be discussing what had just transpired. But this wasn't over. By the time the final bell rang, the story had already swept through Redmond High like wildfire. William Mercer had taken down Ryan Callow in the cafeteria. Not with a punch, not with some chaotic brawl, but with one clean, effortless maneuver. And that's what made it utterly undeniable. If William had thrown punches, if there had been a messy fight, it would have been different. It would have been just another schoolyard scuffle. Kids would choose sides, rumors would distort the details, and eventually it would fade. But this was something else. William had made Ryan appear weak. He had made him look helpless. And in a place like Redmond High, that wasn't something people forgot. William exited the school building, ignoring the stares. Some students watched him as if seeing him for the first time. Others whispered the moment his back was turned. A few simply looked overtly nervous. Ryan wasn't waiting outside. That would have been too transparent. But William wasn't naive. He understood how this worked. Individuals like Ryan didn't easily swallow embarrassment. They didn't simply get up, dust themselves off and move on. They waited. They plotted. They ensured that when they sought their revenge it was significant. William had witnessed this pattern before and he knew this wasn't the end. At home he barely made it through dinner before his mother noticed. She possessed that particular way of looking at him, that slight tilt of her head as if scanning his face for hidden details. "Everything okay at school?" she inquired, setting down her fork. His father, seated across from him, glanced up too. William shrugged. "Yeah, just a regular day." His mother wasn't convinced. His father simply continued eating. That was the distinction between them. His mother asked questions. His father awaited answers. Later that night, William's phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "Unknown, you think you're tough? You got lucky today." "Unknown, watch your back." William stared at the screen, then exhaled, locked his phone and placed it face down on his desk. This wasn't unexpected. It wasn't even surprising. But now he faced a choice. Would he let this go, pretend it never happened? Or would he ensure Ryan and everyone else understood exactly who he was? Because whatever came next, it was coming. Monday morning everything felt different. William sensed it before he even stepped inside. The sideways glances, the hushed conversations that ceased when he walked past. It was all the confirmation he needed. The story had officially gained momentum. By the time he reached his locker, 2 freshmen had already darted out of his way. A junior he didn't even know gave him an approving nod. And then, suddenly, there were those who wanted to be his friend. "Yo, Mercer, you really put Callow on his ass, huh? Dude, I heard you barely even touched him. He just dropped like a sack of bricks. Bro, you got hands like that and you don't even talk? That's cold, man." William ignored most of it, offering nothing more than a glance or a curt nod. Because this wasn't respect. This was entertainment. They weren't seeing him as a person. They were seeing him as a spectacle, a rumor come to life. And that's when he saw Ryan standing in his usual spot near the main entrance. But something had changed. The usual cocky smirk was gone. The easy confidence was missing. Instead, Ryan stood stiffly, his fists clenched at his sides. He wasn't alone. Zach and Brandon flanked him as always, but now they weren't laughing. Ryan met William's gaze for half a second, then looked away. William almost smirked. Almost. But he knew better than to think Ryan had given up. Guys like him didn't just accept a loss. They awaited a rematch. Lunch was worse. William could feel it before he even sat down. The air was thick with anticipation. People watched him as if waiting for something to happen, as if they expected Ryan to storm across the cafeteria for a round 2. But Ryan wasn't even in the room. His usual table was empty. William had just begun eating when someone sat across from him. Not one of Ryan's crew. A girl, Ava Sinclair. He hadn't spoken to her before, but he knew who she was. Smart, confident, never one to follow the crowd. She set her drink down and studied him for a second. Then she said, "You know, you didn't just beat Ryan. You humiliated him." William took a bite of his food, chewed, swallowed. "I picked the fight." Ava smirked. "Yeah, but you ended it. That's worse for him." William didn't respond. She leaned forward slightly. "Look, just be careful. Ryan's dad is on the school board. You think he's going to let this slide?" William met her gaze, steady, unfazed. "Does it look like I care?" Ava exhaled, shaking her head. "You should." She stood up, picking up her tray. "Just watch your back." She walked away, and for the first time since Friday, William felt something new. Not anger, not annoyance, but curiosity. Because whatever was coming next, it wasn't going to be another cafeteria fight. By Wednesday, the energy at Redmond High had shifted again. Ryan Callow wasn't just avoiding William. He was actively erasing him. No more comments, no more smug glances, no more games. Nothing. For some individuals that would have been enough. William had won. Wasn't that the objective? But something still felt off. And that feeling only intensified when Ava found him after last period. She wasted no time. "Ryan's dad is trying to get you expelled." William barely reacted. "For what?" Ava scoffed. "They don't need a reason. He's claiming you attacked Ryan, that it was unprovoked." He's pulling strings to make it stick. William wasn't surprised. He'd seen this scenario play out before. Different locations, same script. A white kid initiates something, a black kid concludes it, and suddenly the rules no longer apply the same way. He ran a hand over his face, inhaling slowly. So what do I do? Ava hesitated, then, fight back. Not with fists. With proof. That night William went to work. By morning he had everything he needed. Screenshots of texts, footage of the cafeteria incident, the complete clip, not just the takedown, and witnesses willing to corroborate his account. When he walked into school he wasn't alone. Ava was with him, as were two other students, kids he barely knew before all this, but they knew the truth and that was enough. They marched directly to the principal's office. And by the time the meeting concluded, Ryan's dad hadn't achieved his objective. William wasn't expelled. He wasn't suspended. Nothing stuck because the truth wasn't just on his side. It was irrefutable. Ryan didn't return to school for the remainder of the week. When he finally reappeared he wasn't the same. Quieter, less confident. He kept his head down, his voice lower. He wasn't afraid of William, but he understood. William hadn't just defeated him in a physical confrontation. He had defeated him where it truly mattered. And that's what people remembered. William never sought respect. He never sought attention. He simply wanted to exist without being tested, without being challenged, without having to perpetually prove himself. But the reality is, some people only learn through consequences. And when you finally demonstrate what you're capable of, they never forget. Sometimes standing your ground isn't about throwing a punch. It's about ensuring the truth resonates louder than the lies. If this story resonated with you, hit subscribe and let us know in the comments. Have you ever had to prove yourself when you shouldn't have had to?